truth of that. It's one of the things that Castelli and Vermilion say is that in the parishes that appeared healthy to them, there was tension, and that they had used the tension for progress and growth. So I think that that's borne out by the studies as well.
My discussion started when I couldn't believe how positive they were.
I know.
We wondered if somehow those who wrote the book only went to, didn't know which kind of parishes they were.
Yeah, well, they tried to get wide samplings. As I say, I mean, when the layperson reads this kind of thing, it's hard to know. All I can say is that the reviews of the book are positive, and they don't say, hey, it's a crummy sampling. In fact, they're sort of proud of the sampling and of the great variety of parishes they used. And, they go to great pains to say how they did the study and how many people that they surveyed, etc. I mean, and where you go from there, I don't know. I have no other way of checking that. In fact, they make a big thing out of saying there isn't any other study like this, and that's one of the great problems. But they do very often find that their surveys go along with what the Gallup polls say. But when the Gallup does their polls, or any of the other big polling organizations, they don't select out the 53 million registered Catholics. If they call you on the phone, they ask you if you're a Catholic, that the other part of the 67 million say yes, and that influences what the polls say. That's why you get the great difference in mass attendance. When Gallup polls do the mass attendance, it comes out to something like 53% of Catholics go to Mass weekly or so, something like that. This poll, working just with core Catholics, or those who are registered in parishes, shows a much higher percentage. So, I mean, I don't know, I have no way of checking it. I mean, and I don't, all you can do is say, well, other surveys indicate. And in other words, they try to show that they're on to they've got correct. Gallup figures show that 80% of American Catholics claim to be church members. Gallup polls show that. It said, applying this 80%, we figure very close to the 52 million Catholics reported in the official Catholic directory. And that's a couple years ago, we had 53.5 million now. Well, these are very suitable scholars involved, and each episode is done a different color, and that's about as much as I can say in defense of it. But they do sound strange to many of us, for sure. Yeah, Sue? Yes, through NORC, National Opinion Research Center. And Greeley comes up with substantially the same thing. In other words, Greeley always says, despite what the media say, and despite, what other liberal Catholics say, it's much healthier than. Greeley's the one, I used the statistics last week about Greeley, about the percentage of people leaving the church he claims is constant over 30 years. Now, for many of us, that's hard to believe. But he said it's only 1 percentage point difference over 30 years. And that's NORC, that's National Opinion Research Center, which is a very trusted organization. So, I mean, yes, Greeley's figures do back up a lot of this. Yes. And he's always saying, despite what the negative doomsayers say, that the Catholic parishes are really healthy. They're one of the most healthy institutions around. And the Catholics got great faith in their parishes and so on. And their claim is it's the media distorts it and so on. I can't go beyond that. Except to say, the great claim is that a lot of times when they do come up with figures, they will say, well, the Gallup polls corroborate our figures. They'll say, they don't say Gallup polls, they'll say national polls. So, I mean, there are figures where you see that things are not, where they are exactly what you would think, like something like on going to confession. There's something like, I'm going by memory and I'm not going to get it right. I don't know, 28% of the Catholics under age 30 don't go at all. Now, even there, I guess when you stop and think, it isn't nearly as bad as one might think, or even there, I'd say in going to confession, where we all know the confessions are down in many ways, even that figure doesn't sound as bad as what one might think. I've never, as I say, this is a unique kind of lecture for me to rely this much on statistics. I almost never do that because I trust my own guts more than statistics usually. But these seem to be helpful in many ways. So talking about the theological perspectives here, in the first sense we have is the great importance of the parish. I heard a lecture by Brian Hare recently in New York where he was pointing out the tremendous importance of the parish, sociologically, and theologically, and experientially. He said sociologically the parish is a dream. I mean, if anybody trying to figure out how to get something done or make it happen, and they could get that many people to belong, 80% out of the large group that belong, and 70% coming weekly to the most important gathering, they'd jump at it. I mean, you can't do that sort of thing. You can't make that sort of thing happen. And here it is built in. It's just amazing the potential for good and for change that would exist within this kind of structure. And then theologically, of course, all the talk of the parish is where it comes, of the church, that's where it comes together. So all of our general notions about the church can be applied and they're worked out right there in the parish life. And experientially, that's where we come to know the church, that's where we meet Christ, that's where we're moved to be involved in social justice. That's the action for us. The parish is where it happens. And it's where our imaginations are shaped, the important events occur. We think about the centrality of the Eucharist and how our perception of baptisms and first communions and confirmations and marriages and funerals, all connected in with the Eucharist and life in the parish. And so while it doesn't do the same things for us today it did for the immigrants, it still has a tremendous power to focus us and to determine our outlook on life. It's there, as I say, that we come to know the truth of the Pauline teaching about the body of Christ. Then the next thing that I wanted to do was to simply take the standard models of the church as we commonly talk about them and to focus in on what that would say about the parish. Well, first of all, we think of the parish as an institution, a sociological structure. I mean, it's unique. You think about the way it brings diverse people together, diverse ages, minority groups, old people. It's sort of a microcosm of what human existence is all about. And as a structure like that, it's right within that setting that is mediated to us the important things of life. It's how we get linked in with our history. It's in that setting that we're told the stories of Jesus. It's in there that we stand on the shoulders of the people who went before us. The parish is what links us in with the universal church, so that we're not just isolated and wondering if we're on the right track or not. Connects us in. So the church is an institution. You can think of it, oh yeah, that means the Pope and the cardinals and the bishops. Well, yeah, it does mean that. The church as institution means parish that's got a mass at a particular time on a Sunday morning, and it's got a CCD program on Wednesday night, and it's where you go and get prepared to get married, and where you take your loved ones to bury them, and it's where we're linked in this institution. And I don't see the next model is taught us what we're seeing here is the great change. More people are here saying church. When I read New York, my favorite thing is into the pulpit and not saying there. It's a very interesting because in the powerful when you hear it. Where they got, I mean, I'm pretty sure I go there for a whole 1 second, 5 seconds, and you many will was It was some. I know I didn't for roof when I came there. It's been for about that. That's the throw with my shoulder. And I got there, and then probably he is soon behind, and everything he was making day. And he was you know, about 15 seconds, I looked at it. Well, it's like it up like this. And look, what the hell's going on? Did I lose my hearing, or my hearing is going? But I mean, that was the whole thing. I mean, there was no expectation on. Now, that is changing. And now there's an expectation that the parish is a herald, that there's a message to be delivered, and that some people expect it, or want it, or come there wanting to hear it. And they're sometimes disappointed if they don't hear something. That's my famous story of when I was first ordained and standing in the back of church, and the guy went out of church, friendly type, and said, "Father," he said, "I came here expecting to hear something in your sermon, and I listened, and you never said anything." And he was sort of avant-garde type. Zindaham was way ahead of his time. Expected to hear something. Let me know I hadn't said anything. Very few weeks go by that I don't remember old Frank's words. My former colleague, Frank Neese, was sitting there thinking, who was that? It's Frank Newman. I don't know. Anyway, that was one of the best things ever said to me. But we have a parish. Parish is a place now where the Word is heard. It's preached. You hear the Word, all the Scripture readings. You hear the whole Bible read, most of it in a 3-year period. And then the parish certainly, I mean, not the shovel, but it's a parish that we be energized to reach out our needs. So in the parish, we hear some jobs. And it's all do that. You know, in the parish, we ask. So you go to the neighbors and air around, get things. So we spend community in the parish. And the parish is a disciples. It's where we'll go to okay, put them on across things out here, feet of prayer and word, letting the cause out in the world. And then the third is to be the parish is to be the sacrament. Parish is the place where it's visible. In fact, the way the parish is a sacrament in which the church people can't see that well. You can say that's supposed to be a sacrament of Christ, but I mean, where would you look? Does that mean you go check out the curial offices in Rome? I mean, where is it? But where the church is real, where you can see it and feel it and touch it, is in the parish. As it gathers to worship, and as you watch how the people interact, and as you see what difference it makes in their daily lives and how they spread the cause. So the church is a sacrament of the kingdom, sacrament of Christ. And as I like to say these days, a sacrament of the Spirit. So that's become my own favorite model for the church, the sacrament of the Spirit. So the church, the parish ought to be a place where there's a charismatic structure, a charismatic element, where people realize they have gifts and they come forward to use them. They take initiative. There's creativity, where the energy centers are multiplied, as I like to say, where there's a lot going on, where people don't wait for the priest to tell them what to do, and where people feel that they have responsibility for all of it. That's my image of a vibrant parish, which is a sacrament. With the word sacrament means sign. It's a sign of the Spirit that breathes where she wills. You know, a Spirit that's active in many ways, different and gives different charisms, free gifts that are used to build up the body of Christ and must be used for the common good. Church as sacrament of the Spirit. Parish as sacrament of the Spirit. In other words, you ought to go in there and watch or observe, be in a community, and get a feeling that the Spirit's at work. And then finally, there's the whole idea of the parish as a community. And now we have, I think, a real tension, as I suggested at the beginning. And the tension is something like this. Between those who want to make the parish into sort of a warm, comforting place where you encounter others and where there's face-to-face relationships, where there's people are known by name and respected as individuals and so on. on the one hand, and that's most of the literature these days and most of the talk, parish as community. And on the other hand, there's an idea represented by Joseph Fichter, a sociologist most recently, writing in America Magazine, who says things like, well, that's a dream. He says his goal of forming community is destructive. That isn't what we should be about, because this is sort of built on that whole idea of everybody getting self-actualized and fulfilled and so on. He thinks it ends up being sort of a selfishness. And he said, no, what a parish really is a secondary association. Now that's a technical word in sociology. Like a labor union would be a secondary association. A family would be a primary community. So what he's saying is that it is not true that parishes are families. That they're more like, and I'm not sure I picked a good example there, but anyway, if I follow through, let me try it anyway. They'd be more like the labor union than the family. In other words, it'd be like a functional unit. One of the things he says is that it is said that small is beautiful in creating community, but his phrase is no, large is functional. He's one of those that studied the parishes and found out that the small parishes don't get the job done very often. Well, we got this sense that they're very community-oriented, that they're not providing for the spiritual needs of the people very often because they don't have a wide range of programming. And then many small parishes have not caught up with Vatican II as much as suburban parishes have. And there's less sense of social justice there. And he said, no, small isn't beautiful, large is functional. And so what he wants us to have is a different sense of the church. As he says, it's not a selective, charismatic ashram. It's borrowed from the world of Hinduism, where everyone's together in a communal farm situation and so on. Nor is it a warm community, nor is it a big, happy family. But he says it's a secondary association where it's okay to have impersonal relationships and formal roles. Now, that really, I think, sets the tension between the way we end up thinking about the parishes today, and it's going to make a lot of difference in how one ends up talking about it or how you end up practically dealing with it. Now, at one level, I think Joseph Fichter is right. That is, you can't have 5,000 families in a parish, and have warm face-to-face relationships. That's not possible. And maybe what he's saying is destructive to try to set it up like you think it is possible. Like I heard someone saying, they go to their usual 9:30 Mass, and they get to know some people there. Hi, hello, it's familiar and everything. But if they go to the 11 o'clock Mass in their parish, they don't know anybody. It's all different. It's a whole different crowd. I may not know anybody. So you begin to ask yourself, maybe Fichter here is on to something. I'm not going to, come down on either side of that, really, but I think there is a tension in our expectation along that line. It could be, if it's not possible for parishes to be warm communities, then a lot of people are frustrated when maybe they shouldn't be frustrated. I mean, if that's what you're looking for in a parish, then maybe you're looking for something you can't have. Therefore, that'd be sort of silly to end up walking around frustrated about it. Now, maybe that has to work in some other way. That brings up the whole idea of a parish being a community of communities, where you really, what it'd be is like a federation. So you don't expect to know people at Mass. You don't expect to have a greeting of peace where everybody is buddy-buddy as though they've been knowing each other for 20 years. You don't expect that. But if you need that, then you do it with your rosary group, or you do it with your renew group, or the people you made for seal with, or the people that you did Christ Renews His Parish with, or any of the other small group things that really end up happening. So that would lead it. Now, I also quoted Phil Murnion's paper here on on community, and he gave some models of, you know, what he thinks community might be all about and so on, and how you're going to go about it. Traditionalists returning to the past, making the parish like it used to be, well, that's not too feasible these days. What he calls a sectarian response, that's the kind of people who want to get together and for either on the right or the left, for social action things or for charismatic things, and where they think in small group terms and not so much the whole parish. Community as intimacy is the one I've been describing. And then the whole idea of an association, which may be part of Fichter's idea, and our friend Phil Murnian is not happy about that because he'd like us to try more effort to bring things together. And so his model that he likes is the community as solidarity. And he thinks that's a beautiful and rich word and a good way to describe what he thinks a parish ought to be. And he puts a lot of stress on the tradition and centrality of the Eucharist and creating structures that work, finding out ways to organize yourself, and relying on those rather than on emotional highs. Instead of really getting all up, and because we made this Cursillo weekend together, and he thinks what really you need are structures that in the parish that will keep you going and make it over the long haul. And we'll mobilize our energies even after we're not so high about the whole thing. Well, those are, whatever way we say it, it seems to me it is true that the parish is somehow related to the question of community. It draws us together. Maybe it is true we might be expecting too much if we want that to be warm and intimate. Then I was trying to turn to some of my own thoughts about this, about how we're going to create community. A lot of my ideas are connected with how the leaders sought to function, and that the leaders are very important. And in fact, the pastor is very important in how parishes develop. Parishes have their own unique history and so on. The pastor has a lot to do with shaping it. And I think it's silly to ignore that. And what we need to do is to get the pastors and the other pastoral leaders to develop more of this servant leader notion and to quit worrying about uniqueness. I just lectured to some of the priests who gave a presentation on in our diocese. They wanted to know about the question of, well, what's unique about the priest? And my real answer was to that, that's the wrong question. As long as you walk around trying to figure out what's unique about yourself, then you're not going to get any place. Because uniqueness separates. What good does it do if you did find out something that was unique about yourself? Well, then that's just what we're trying to avoid in a sense. We're trying to figure out how to be in community. So it's not very productive to work at it that way. In fact, and if you do ask the question that way, you're going to get the wrong answer. There's only one answer to it. If you ask what's unique about the priest and what he can do that no one else can do, and that is say Mass, hear confessions, and anoint the sick. And that's not the answer these priests wanted. Because that would just put them in a box then. And they don't want that. So there's no answer to the question of uniqueness. So what we got to do is figure out what is distinctive about priests and the other people in the parish who we call leaders, and the idea is precisely the uniqueness is that they are leaders of the parish, and that's enough, and that's a lot. And what you got to do as a leader then is to figure out how to get your own needs out of the way, and how to keep from being compulsive and authoritarian and exercise one's Messiah complex. First of all, it's sort of a negative pruning. That is, how can you figure out how to keep from being compulsive and authoritarian? And that's a very hard thing to figure out. One of my ways of suggesting how you can do that is by multiplying the energy centers and multiplying activities in the parish so that you can't control them even if you want to. That's the only way I can see to get around it, is to have so much going on and so much initiative and so much sense of responsibility by other people that you can't control it even when you want to. And that's, as I can see it, is one of the few ways this is going to work out. The other way is, which is much more optimistic and probably unrealistic, is to the cultivation of virtue. That is the other way of doing it. Cultivate virtue would mean that one, and then I list some of the virtues that I think would be important, and they're the ones I use all the time, mainly committed openness, a virtue which allows us to feel confident and rooted in what we know and what we are, and because we're confident, therefore we're open to what's going on. I talked about that last time in terms of pluralism. And other virtues like enlightened simplicity, so we actually know something, but we wear that knowledge lightly and don't come across as a know-it-all or we're going to tell everybody what to do. So enlightened simplicity would be a good virtue for pastoral leaders to have. That is, they've studied, they know something about theology, they know something about what's going on, and they don't use that to badger people, but they use it to illumine, they use it to facilitate, to enable, to empower others. And that would be another virtue that would be very helpful. Then, what we got to do is celebrate all these lay people that have come forward. 83% of the leaders are lay people. And we got to be happy about that and try to foster that and help them. And one of the things you got to help them do is to avoid getting burned out, so you don't have anything to give anymore, getting tired of the whole thing. And how are you going to do that? Well, one of the ways you do that in the ministry is by making sure that the interaction with the community is energizing and not just draining. So that your perception is that you're not just giving all the time, but that much of the life in the parish is receiving as well. And that's not too mysterious. I mean, that can be, you might be counseling somebody, and it's a matter of learning from them as well as trying to help them. There's a lot of ways to make the ministry, and a lot of us are involved in various ways, to be life-producing and enhancing and not just draining. Fundamental thing is attitude. If you think that all the people you're serving are empty vessels and you've got to pour things in, well, you're going to get tired after a while. And you're going to get drained, and you're not going to have anything to give anymore. But that's the wrong model. If you think, well, I'm not doing that, what I'm doing is interacting with people who are already graced and spirited and have something to say and already doing good things, then I can build on that. Learn from it, tap it, instead of just feeling like I'm pouring things in. And then there is the whole business of fostering personal growth for people in various dimensions of their lives. That's part of what building a community is. The church ought to be, a parish ought to be a place where people develop, where leaders can come forward, where people's talents are used, and where people who are nervous get to be unnervous. And people who haven't studied are prompted to study, and so they can do something better. So people can get up and read the scriptures and are prompted to do some studying so they can read them well. So it is a matter of various ways within the parish community of fostering the growth, physical, emotional, and so on. That's where I think, it comes in with what people are looking for. People's expectation is, we want you to help us grow. That's where it really says that the people who actually leave the church are not leaving it so much because they're mad at the Pope or the bishops. Those people stay around and bitch. But the people who are leaving are those who are not finding the spiritual nourishment. They're not being fed, as they say. They're not finding their vibrancy or community. And so they really do leave because it's an existential problem, because it's in their guts that they're looking for something. So they go elsewhere, to the growth movements, to psychology, to fundamentalist churches, to evangelical groups or whatever, in order to find this fulfillment. Again, I think it's probably hard for people really to believe those stats. That's Greeley's study again, but maybe there is something to it. And we're going to form community more as a byproduct. I mean, I think that Fichter is right in this fundamental human sense. To walk around trying to form community is destructive. I mean, we're going to form community here. I think that doesn't work. It's like saying, I'm going to be happy. I mean, you don't get happy by trying to be happy. That's one of those destructive things you do. I'm going to be happy. Well, it doesn't work that way. Those great human realities come as byproducts. They happen because we're doing something. Communities happen when people work side by side, or share values, or get something done together, and then have a drink. I mean, that's when it happens. It happens because of their shared activity. So the idea here is we're going to have community by being a justice-seeking community. We're going to have it by reaching out to others. If we all get together and help the poor people, we'll probably find that we all come closer together. And so they probably find a sense of community developing in our students who gather on Thursday nights to bake pizzas for the poor. I mean, if they came together and say, let's all have community tonight, I doubt if it would work as well. They get together, they make pizzas, and then they eat some of them afterwards. Take some of them to the food distribution centers and feed some people. Well, I figure that's the way community develops. And the people who are hell-bent on we're going to make it happen, I think that precisely that's where it's stifled. And there's reasons for saying that because there's a lot of literature that says that's what you should do. That's how you should make a parish healthy. That is, try to form community. Staff should form a community. And then other people form communities. And try to form communities. And then it works from there. My theory is, no, it can't really do something, like work for justice or peace or respect for life. Then the last part of this is, well, that was totally from Bill Bausch's book, The Christian Parish, and I think a lot of it is self-explanatory. I might just pick out a few things that he does have a marvelous parish. I can't hear people talk about it, who've been there, and hear him talk about it. It is quite remarkable. But they do just simple kind of things, I suppose, in some ways. I'm reminded of how they handle funerals. This is a good example. It's striking. What they did is they decided that everything, the funeral would be totally community-based. So the first thing they did was to say, well, we're not going to have the wake in the funeral home. I mean, why should we do that? So they had the wakes in the church. That's where you bring the body. And we're not going to spend these astronomical amounts of money, but coffins will make our own, have our own simple coffins. And we'll bury the people here. And with people in the parish, we'll take care of helping the people through the grieving process. They'll be there. And we won't have a special funeral mass. The people at every sacrament in that parish, everything that happens, always happens at a regular mass. Don't have other mass. You have the funeral happens at the community mass, the regular mass. And so it's interesting that you know, it's simple. It's an example of how they try to do things. So there's all kinds of people involved in the parish that are there to help out in the time of the funeral, of the death. You know, visit the family and take care of it, make the food afterwards, and coffin body brought to the church, lies there in church. Well, it's like countercultural, isn't it? I mean, that's not how you start that funeral. And it made some people mad, of course, when they did that. And it saved a lot of people a lot of money. And there's no limousine. You couldn't drive a limousine to the funeral, drive in regular car. So all kinds of an example of the way they've done things in their parish. The other thing they do in their parish is they always have two people involved in any one activity. And those two people are always preparing the next people to take over. You can't stay in any job too long. There's not going to be two people who are going to run the RCIA for 10 years. Oh, it always has to be revolving. And so you always have to work yourself out of a job. You always have to have two other people who are ready to take over. And then the way they handle their deacon, how that would be interesting. In other words, they would that phrase, they have to take a deacon and say, come and be a deacon here. And then no. The only way you come and be a deacon here is if you have something to contribute. And we'll help you do that. So this is an example, like a married man who was a deacon, and they said, okay, you can minister here. We'll send you away to become an expert marriage counselor. If you're a married man, then you can come back here and minister in this parish. I have some definite service to give to the rest of the community. He does a lot of work in breaking down his large parish into zones, as he said, neighborhoods, they have neighborhood leaders, and so on, so that's how he solves the problem of community. So he knows the large grouping can't be more to the community, so he says, well, if we're going to find it smaller groupings, like the neighborhood, where you already know the next door neighbors anyway, and that's the place where you can get your face-to-face kind of relationship. I listed here, this is number 12 there that's got thrown in, policies that build. He says that goes from another source, so those weren't his, but that comes from the research, which shows the people who think that liturgies are good and happy with their spiritual experience do those kinds of things. So there's a lot of planning that goes on, and they curse the hymns before Mass. And say that the liturgical text might not like it, but or maybe they do, I don't know. The survey data shows that they're very helpful. Type of homily, music connected, so on. And some sort of social gap. One of the things he says is that CC classes are destructive. They have negative influences on parents. They're in the context of other parish activities. Unless these youngsters doing other things, then they're going to resent the CCD. So one of the things he does is like have the kids at a certain grade over to his house, and they stay overnight and have a overnight thing. He does a lot of that. Also, one thing he did, I think I started this myself, is every Saturday night he cooks dinner for some of the people in his parish. He invites one couple over each Saturday night, cooks dinner for them. That's good. Yeah, I thought I'd start doing that. And one great drop. Then we have other concrete suggestions too. Ways of trying to make the whole thing more vibrant. The one I like is he writes a letter to. And it signs that they send it to himself, and I think the parents, and he writes it to all the kids who are being baptized, and they're baptized at the Mass. And then they have to open it when they're 13 years old. Can't open it until they're 13. They get an example of it. And they tell them how you were welcome at the time, you were happy that you were, and people applaud you, and so on, tells them what happened, and that he hopes that they somehow remember that, and that they carry it out. So you get all these neat personal touches. But you ask yourself, what underlies it, and how did he get that way? How did he have this marvelous parish? Well, I think one thing is his own style. He's very open. He's willing to learn from the people. He's flexible. He's willing to change things when they didn't work. He allows all kinds of people to help him. He insisted on education. Pressure on education. And we can't just start something without knowing something. And that seemed to me, as I've listened to him talk, has been one of the keys. So, I mean, you can't just have a parish council. If you have a parish council, they have to know something. They have to educate. They have to understand theology and have to understand what's happening. So that seems to be the key for him to get all that done. Well, if anybody wants to ask me anything about this last item here, we have just a few minutes left. I'll say my final words. Yeah.
Back up to the first question. We'll come back to the blurb and just be that would be one of the blurb it. Repeating it anyway.
I mean, the point is that you need to read that history, I think, with a critical mind and see what is bad. I mean, I like history, and I see things that I think we don't want to repeat. One is, I don't think we want to see the whole conflictual side of it. I mean, there's no reason to have riots and so on. Introduce civil discourse. That's the first thing. I mean, why are 200 people hurt in this phase? I mean, I'd rather see civil discourse. That would be one thing. I think the other thing is that we've learned in so many areas of life, the labor management being for example, that the idea of finding a cooperative model. So that we got to find ways in which parishes blending the ordained leader and the other leaders in relationship to the people that make up the community. So we have a cooperative mode going. And I don't think that it's going to make sense to go back to lay trusteeism as we knew in the 19th century. But I think what we have to learn is something about how that interaction went. For example, that lay people really do become the dominant force in a given parish, say, where there's no pastor. And they take on greater and greater sensibilities, and that they feel that they are continuity, that they feel that they have a history of that particular faith.
then the self-expressed or any person and the other pastor leader, and then they recognize that the person's got ideas of their own, and there ought to be a fruitful interchange. That's how I see getting away from the idea of this traditionalism, like we're just going to be always did it in this case, right? Therefore we're not open to any new ideas. I see the only way this can happen is that the priest who may come in and preaches, or whoever the pastoral leader is who is right there, has an interaction with the people of the history tradition that they know so well and get into the mix, but some of the new ideas of the new leaders, and even the aged people who come in and out. So I think if you're on come in and if you're going to preach in your own territory, you're going to listen to what they're saying. And I can imagine a phone call during the week to the parish, saying I had to go in there and preach and talking to them about them and getting feedback from them. And then getting some of my own ideas in there, and that makes everything harmony. Kind of like we ever do a marriage funeral sermon by sitting down talking to these people or grieving people about what to do and what do they mean, and kind of leave that in, but place it so that's larger context. So there's another thing I'm talking about, sort of a cooperative dialogue interaction here. The resident people who have control of the parish and whoever the leaders are who come and go there. I'm sure there's a lot of things to be said about that. One of the things we're going to probably make the priest are not going to be happy being circumcised, no matter what. I think you can make that palatable no matter what. What that means is the resident populations are going to be happy. But that means that you always have to be pushing for that constitutional change. Entertaining married people, entertaining women. You got to push it that because you can't be sitting there saying, I'm going to get the best of the circuit riders. Because that's not going to work. It's not a happy solution. It wasn't happy in the 1700s, and it won't be. Surface in a given community, or how it gets there. I mean, ideally, you wouldn't want that the leader within the community is recognized as the real leader. Now, I mean, that would be what you should want. The surface is the real leader. Well, he speaks the mind of most of the people, articulate it and pull it together. And any community has it. And say, well, discuss this, and I don't know who the leader is. It's not a mystery. You know, I mean, it happens. That's how, you know, they're who the real leader would be. That's the person who ought to be leading. Yeah. Who they have to I mean, and that's the new thing. You know, I mean, I don't see any theology of it as leadership be presiding at the youth. If it doesn't happen, you can have a problem. It won't work. In one sense, in that fact, you're not going to get over it because it's wrong. The leader should preside at the youth. I mean, we go along. The other person who's the resident leader there, and again, they surface on their own. What we try to do is make it what the parish community is all about. I'm trying to match it. What we try to do. I suggest that these raise up. I think some of the tensions how they're going to get around those. Part of my answer is skip the I'm not going to settle for it. I would push for the right. We have to have leaders. God and mandate. And but as long as I was a priest coming in there, I make estimate. In other words, I have to figure out what the people are thinking. I'm a leader and saying, well, hey, what are your ideas? I try to weave that in. I was getting as much feedback from preaching at a funeral. But my theory is to talk to people and find out as much as I can. Actually, preach behind me. And goes, I'd be happy to answer the question. That's the end of it. They always go too fast. The presence and feedback, non-verbal, and what people are thinking about it. We'll also have a series anybody get a reminder of that. Anybody who wants to be, and that's the way I can keep that program and our other good people coming from Lawrence Cunningham, Notre Dame, Experience, and Richard so we have one more. Thank you.